But actually, I would like to ask you very briefly because I've asked every guest on this webinar because I think it's something everyone very curious to hear from every professional uh, successful musician. What is your uh, routine, practicing routine? How you keep yourself in the shape? What you learn about yourself over your professional career over the last 30 years? What do you do differently when you were 15 years old and you do now? So there are certain tools you establish for yourself. What are the things you have to do for yourself technically and musically, how to keep yourself excited about what you do. Just tell us a little bit about this.
Well, this is a wonderful question and a very big topic because I think the practice routine is very individual and very personal for everybody. And it's at a certain point, we work out our own system. I think the the big mistakes during my teen years that I was making is I was impatient and I wanted to get the grasp of the work as quickly as possible. And just to be able to play it and just to be able to perform it, I would usually fall in love with the piece. And the most important thing for me was just to get from beginning to end. And it almost didn't matter what was happening in between. But the problem is that our brain, especially at that age, soaks up a lot of information. And what I found most challenging was to unlearn really, really bad habits at that age. Essentially, most of the works that I studied between the ages of 10 to maybe even 20, I could barely play in my late 20s, 30s. I would actually have to put them through quarantine and relearn and redo most of the things because my brain have memorized some really terrible reflexes. And this was, I think, something that I definitely learned from. And when I was in my mid 20s, that this is when I really started to create a system and a routine that I felt was working for me much better. And that actually immediately resulted in more successful results with competitions or auditions or whatever it is, or concerts, just plainly stabilize the quality and consistency of performances. That was, I felt, was the major challenge and something that I needed to change about my preparation. So now my suggestion to young students about preparation or learning a new work, because I find that opening that score for the very first time can be a very overwhelming experience sometimes, especially if it's a ginormous piece like Sibelius Concerto, Tchaikovsky, or Brahms. Uh, I don't even recall looking at those scores for the first time right now. It's been, a long, long, long time ago. And I think I wasn't looking at even those notes enough just because I played these pieces by ear because somebody next door was practicing it for the entire year. I felt that I memorized this piece from that person and I was making the same mistakes as that person, you know. So dividing and subdividing the piece into sections, okay? Less is more, or rather, less is less. And trying not to get overwhelmed is in a movement like Tchaikovsky Concerto, let's say first movement, which is 20 minutes long. I would first of all, after playing it through a few times, we know what the difficult places are going to be. I take out those places and I work on them separately. So instead of running beginning to end every time, I work on those passages. And here's something again, direct message from Miss DeLay. Miss DeLay believed that in a passage, especially in a difficult passage, there will be one or two difficult shifts or a funky bow change. She said, take those shifts, practice them, then slowly start putting the rest of the passage. And from this idea, I came up with my own strategy, which I like to call the jigsaw puzzle. So you have a lot of little pieces, a lot of little detailed pieces in the musical composition. There is no reason, there is no way for you to see the big picture until you put those little pieces together. Okay, so in this sense, I believe slow is fast. By slowly starting first those shifts in the passage, then putting the passage together, then putting a section together, and then finally you have the big picture. Rushing through is detrimental to studying a work. It all everything, my other favorite example, what I notice in master classes or going through a process of uh, watching a student studying a new work, is that I see someone who is, let's say, very talented and is able to get through the piece, let's say, easily. But I see also that this person started building a house from the second floor. There is no basement, there is no first floor, but the second floor is already being decorated. And this is exactly the danger that I was talking about before, because this person already memorized an enormous amount of mistakes, wrong reflexes, wrong rhythms, uh, no observance of dynamics, and what composer wanted to say. You can take off with your own interpretation. That is very important. Individuality and your own interpretation is very important. But you first need to observe what the composer wanted to say, what is actually printed in the score, provided it's a good addition, provided it's a good score. And it's always nice to look at the manuscript if available, or urtext edition if available, just to get closer to the idea. If you have accomplished that solid base, if you finally have basement and first floor, then you're ready for the second floor, decoration, interpretation.
Great advice. I agree with you on the practically on everything you said. I just maybe would add something, because sometimes there's a danger, and I remember I also went through this stage when you start putting all these small puzzles together, small pieces of the puzzle together, and sometimes you forget what are the puzzles and how they fit to the whole picture. So I think it's very important to keep that perception of the maybe ideal sound in your head, even without playing the instrument. But we have to have something which we really relate to, and then we can build all those pieces, technical pieces. Of course, there's lots of work has to be done in detail, but always trying to change those two perceptions. So we see the whole picture, and then we trying to emphasize small details. Then at least we're not going to be completely lost in the forest of those small trees.
Absolutely, and I think actually we are on the same page. We're actually talking about the same thing, because I was going to finish my suggestion by saying that once these pieces are put together and you feel comfortable, there's absolutely no question you need to have a feeling of the overall idea from beginning to the end of the movement, from beginning to the last movement, that you have an idea of how how all the smaller details and how the smaller sections work within the bigger picture and the bigger context of the piece. There's no question about it. Yes.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And then another thing, yeah, you reminded me when you said something about listening somebody play and learning the piece by ear, and how dangerous this is, although very exciting. I just remembered that I think I learned most of the Ronda Capricciosa by Saint-Saëns by listening Jascha Heifetz's recording. I couldn't play half of those things, but I was already, pretending that, there was some good spot, a good part on this, because I was very young and I was really very excited to hear this incredible, still up to this day, one of the most incredible recording of this. But it took me, I think, literally maybe 30 years from the point when I thought that I'm going to play that piece, when I actually started practicing this piece, which is, of course, in my repertoire, but only maybe in the last 10 years I've been playing that piece. I could not even approach that piece because I learned that way. So in my head, it was a big obstacle to go through. So it's very dangerous, yes, to play by ear. Although, of course, we need to find some pieces which excite us, and we want to learn them. And
Let me ask you, what is your take on young student listening to recordings in general? How do you feel about that?
um, these days especially,
Yeah.
I think it's very dangerous. When I was growing up, you were growing up, we had 2, 3 recordings to listen. Perhaps it was a different kind of options. Perhaps at that time we would say, yes, maybe you can listen Chikovsky Concerto by orchestra. But of course, now I suggest that in the most cases, unless it's something very unfamiliar, and I do sometimes with some of the contemporary music, if I need to learn it quickly, and I have no clue what this music about, I would rather listen to the recording. But my suggestion is to spend some time, especially if somebody learns Tchaikovsky concerto, in order to establish some kind of understanding of this music. You should not sacrifice that moment of enjoying this discovery of this music by playing this first. And of course, everyone already heard. It's impossible to be a professional musician and not to hear Tchaikovsky concerto. We overheard this interpretation over and over. I
But
don't
would
know what you think about it.
you have a specific instruction in terms of how many times you listen to a particular performer, or how many times you listen to the Tchaikovsky, how many different versions? When do you stop, and when do you start your own process of thinking about the piece? Because this is exactly where the danger lies. Just like your example with listening to Jascha Heifetz, and we're all victims of listening to Jascha Heifetz and putting ourselves on a completely wrong path in many ways, because we at that age don't realize the influence and the impact recordings of Jascha Heifetz or David Oyster had on us. It just all went directly here, and we thought, at least I thought, this is the only way this piece should be interpreted, and these are the rhythms and the liberties that I need to implement in my playing. So I usually say, don't listen to more than 2 recordings or 2 performers
Or
of the.
just listen to my recording. Yes.
Just listen to my recording. Yes, you can download it on iTunes.